Good morning, students, and welcome to this lecture on the Odes of Keats. I have with me the guest speaker, Dr. Indira Nityanandam, who is the principal of S.R. Mehta Arts College, Ahmedabad. Indira, welcome to the studio, ma'am. Indira ma'am is an expert on several fields in English literature, and today she will be dealing with the Odes of Keats. John Keats lived for only 25 years and 4 months, but his literary achievement is extraordinary. His literary career expanded for only 5 years, a little more than 5 years, and it is said that 3 of his greatest odes, that is, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to Melancholy, and Ode on a Grecian Urn, were written in a single month. Time gave him little, but talent gave him much. And Keats could achieve and contribute to literature so much that he has earned for himself a place amongst the literary greats of English literature. His greatest contribution and achievement lies in this, that he could combine the most complex of themes in the most simplest of poems. From Psyche's bower to the nightingale's glade to the warmth, luxury of Ode to Autumn, Keats has produced some of the best poetry in the most beautiful of languages. Ma'am, could you kindly tell us more on John Keats, please?
Thank you, Namita. It is said of Keats that if he wrote only his odes and had not written anything else, his contribution to English literature would have still been the same. And I'm happy that we're going to be talking about the Odes of Keats. But before we do that, can we have slide number 1, please? Before we do that, let us look at the years in which he lived. 1795 to 1821. As Namita just mentioned, just 25 years. And even within those 25 years, his writing career was only about 6 years. Oh, for a life of sensation, done of thoughts, he said. Next slide, please. When we look at Keats, the young Keats, look at the picture. You can see the young man and the lines there. Some of you, my dear students, might recall that this is from a famous poem by Keats. Not an ode, but very well known, La Belle Dame sans Merci. I see a lily on thy brow with anguish moist and fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose fast withereth too. Do we need to know about the life of a poet before we can really appreciate his poetry? Any writer for that matter? My dear students, I think for some writers it may not be important, but for some others it might be very important. When you look at the odes, you might ask yourself, why should there be so much of sorrow in the life of such a young man? And therefore, in order to understand the poet Keats, I think you should know something about his life. Maybe some of you know that his parents died young. Maybe some still others know that he was very attached to his elder brother, George and Georgina. They decided to migrate to Australia. And remember, we are talking about the Romantic age, when there were no supersonic jets which could take you from England to Australia. It would be about 6 months before a letter reached them, and they migrated to Australia. You then have his younger sister, Fanny Keats. They were orphans and they needed guardians. There was no guardian who was willing to take on both of them, and therefore they found different families to live with. He had a younger brother, Tom Keats, very attached to John, both of them, John and Tom Keats. And imagine what happened to Tom Keats, Thomas Keats. What happened to him? He had tuberculosis, TB as we call it. And in those days, the disease was fatal. Not anymore, my dear students, but in those days there was no cure. John sat by his brother's bedside, treating him, taking care of him, but nothing helped. And very soon, Tom Keats died of tuberculosis. Imagine, my dear students, soon after that, John Keats, our dear poet, realized that he himself was suffering from tuberculosis. The same disease which had taken the life of his brother had now attacked him. And that was not the end of his problems. He was in love with Fanny Brown, not to be confused with the sister, Fanny Keats, Fanny Brown. They were in love with each other. But for whatever reason, when Fanny Brown realized that Keats, our poet, was suffering from tuberculosis and that it was a fatal disease, she decided to part ways with him. That, my dear students, is not the end of his sorrows. His poem, Endymion, was published, one of his long poems. And just imagine, it was torn to pieces by reviewers. Poor Keats had his cup full of sorrows, and that is why you can probably understand the kind of poetry that he wrote, especially when we look at the odes. Which age did he live in? All of you certainly know that he lived in the Romantic Age. The Romantic Age, which begins in 1798. Some of you might be wondering, why 1798? Why not 1800? But I'm sure many of you know the answer, because that was the year in which the lyrical ballads were published by Wordsworth and Coleridge. And undoubtedly, it is the lyrical ballads and later the preface to the lyrical ballads which set into motion the Romantic Age. The Romantic Age, in total contrast to the neoclassical age which preceded it, moved from the drawing rooms into the world of nature, moved from the importance of manner and style to matter, moved from classicism or neoclassicism to romanticism, moved from the reality, social reality, to the world of imagination, moved from drawing room, artificial life of upper class society to the world of nature. The trees and plants, the birds and beasts, the beauty of nature appealed and inspired our romantic writers. What about the attitude? From objectivity, they moved to subjectivity. What happens when writers write from their heart? What happens when writers write what they feel? What happens when writers write subjectively? Their language is the language of the common man. Their language is no longer the artificial language. Their language no more gives importance to just meter or to rhyme. This was the kind of poetry that the major writers of the Romantic Age wrote. Who were the major writers? Next slide, please. Who were the major writers of this period? William Wordsworth. What are the poems that you think of? You think of Tintern Abbey? You think of the Immortality Ode? You think of the Prelude? You think of his pantheism? You think of his love for nature, nature which was also his guide, nature which was his guardian. The next poet, and equally important, because you think of Coleridge also as a critic. You think of his Biographia Literaria, where he spelt out very clearly all that romanticism meant to these poets. You think of an unfinished poem like Kubla Khan. You think of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. You think of Christabel. You think of supernatural, so much of the supernatural. And then, of course, you have John Keats, about whom we are going to talk in detail. Along with Keats, you have to think of Shelley. Shelley, who wrote the famous elegy on the death of Keats called Adonis. Shelley, who sang of the west wind and the skylark, the great lyric poet of the period. You think of Shelley because he talked about our saddest songs. And you think of Shelley also because he too died young along with Keats. Shelley is important because of Prometheus Unbound, the romantic spirit of liberty, the romantic spirit of independence. Imagine fighting with the gods to bring down to earth fire. That is what Prometheus stands for. We also need to look at Lord Byron and remember Charles Lamb and William Hazlitt. the development of the personal essay. So important, a characteristic feature of the romantic page. What are the characteristics of the poetry of Keats? I would like to suggest that in Keats's poetry, you find contrasts, you find paradoxes, you find binary oppositions. And what are these? Something which the young poet felt. Art is long, art is eternal, he wanted to believe. But at the same time, he was constantly troubled, worried by the feeling of the transience of everything. Whether it is love, whether it is passion, whether it is beauty, to Keats, they all seemed so transient. He knew that he had to live in the world of reality. Slide, please. He knew that he had to live in the world of reality, but constantly he wanted to dream. He wanted to escape, as our odes will show us later. He wanted to escape into the world of nature. He wanted to escape into the world of art. He wanted to forget the pain that was so much a part of this reality. Can you then be surprised that melancholy and joy? You know, students, it almost sounds like an oxymoron when you place these things next to each other. But this was the truth about Keats's life. If there was joy, there was melancholy. If there was melancholy, there was joy. He was constantly contrasting the ideal with the real. What is the kind of life that he wanted to live? And what was a life that he was forced to live? A life of sorrow, pain, where he says, youth dies young, but age continues to live.
Ma'am, if I just may interrupt here, death has always been a recurring theme.
Yes.
But then so has beauty in Keats's poetry. Of course, I mean, the death of Tom was playing on his mind.
Absolutely.
He himself was suffering from tuberculosis. In fact, it's really sad that several writers were lost to this disease.
Absolutely.
I'm reminded of the Bronte sisters, our own Toru Dutt.
Absolutely.
She
Much
al-
later,
much
100 years
later,
later.
100. Thank goodness, that is not an issue today. But yes, going back to Keats, I do feel that death is always there. Even not just in his odes, but also in La Belle Dame sans Merci, that the beautiful woman, yet she represents death. And
yes.
Of course, there is beauty in his poetry, but yes, the melancholic note is very much evident.
Namita, I agree with you, and I'm sure, my dear students, you would agree that for somebody so young who had seen so much of death around him, Namita, I would say the death of his parents to begin with, right?
Often
And
very
then, of course, the death of his younger brother. And the fact that medicine could not save you, that the best care and love that John could give Tom, yet did not survive. You're absolutely right. This is what he saw around him. And yet there was this note of hope, shall I say? Shall I call it optimism? That even in the face of this continuous death around him, he still is able to look at
Right,
life
such
as something.
Definitely.
Certainly, the mortal and the immortal, for example. You know, you find that in his poems. Trying to capture the immortal in the mortal, if I can put it that way. I think that's very important in most of Keats's poems. Yes, because I think death and life, to him, a very thin line, or to anyone for that matter, there's a very thin line demarcating, you know, the area of death and the area of life. And when one has seen death so closely, I think it makes a difference, and therefore you see it in this young person. Sometimes I wonder how such a young person like John Keats, you know, hardly 25, something the way our students are, you know, that age almost, or just a few years older, how he could feel so deeply. And then, Namita, I'm tempted to say that this is also probably because the experiences were so much more. You know, when you experience more, I guess you feel more. When you feel more, you think more. Or I don't know, if you think more, you feel more. I don't know what comes first. But in the case of Keats, certainly, I would never say that he was a philosopher. You know, he lived life to the full. And that is what comes across in all his poems. So I would say you could have death in life, You could have mortality and immortality. You could have the desire to connect with life. And in contrast to that, you could have separation. You know, if you put these binaries together, you see why and how his poems become so great. That you could have both these existing simultaneously. You know, being held by passion, but yet a desire to escape. Because he says beauty dies young.
Yes.
So if beauty is going to die young, do you need to be able to get out of it? Or should you continue? But the same poet could sing, a thing of beauty is a joy,
Joy
forever.
forever.
The famous Endymion begins with these lines. So sometimes it's very, very difficult, you know, to understand how a poet at this young age could feel so much. I would go on to some of his characteristics, other characteristics which are related to him as a romantic writer. Next slide, please. These are the common characteristics of all the romantic poets, and you find them in Keats also. Love of nature, love of beauty, right? You find it in every romantic poet. The importance of imagination, you know, to fly on the wingless, right, of poesy.
Of poesy.
To be able to fly is important. Sensuousness, you know, is a characteristic of romantic poetry, but I would say is more a characteristic of Keats's poetry. My dear students, all of you know of the five senses. And when you consider the importance of the senses, most of you might immediately say that sight or eyes are the most important because most of our experiences are through sight. You look at a beautiful object and the poet describes it. You're absolutely right. But when we come to Keats's poetry, I want to tell you that it seems as if all the five senses are equally important. Think of those lines where he describes